Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here at the Maryland State Bar Association. We are here for our Coffee and Conversations with Legislators series, and we are working to connect our legal community to Annapolis so you can understand what's going on, what's coming up, and think about ways that you can get involved and engage in this advocacy as well. So today we have Delegate Darryl Barnes, who's here with us. He represents Prince George's County, and he also serves as chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland. And we will have the discussion facilitated today by former legislator Bobby Zirkin, who has done an incredible job of these discussions over the last several months. And so, as I said, we're recording today so that we can share this out with our community after this morning. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd ask you to please post those in the chat that we'll be monitoring. But otherwise, if you can stay on mute just so that we can hear the speakers, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much, Bobby and Delegate Barnes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Shelly. I appreciate that. And good morning to everyone. And good morning, Delegate. It's good to see you again.
Yes, sir.
We are not going to talk about the weekend we just had playing ball. That was not a great experience for either one of us, but we're here today on behalf of State Bar Association and 26,000 members across the state in the legal profession to talk through legislative issues. And I'm really excited to have you on here today. For those who don't know, Delegate Barnes, as Shelly just said, has been a delegate since 2014, representing Prince George's County. He is a really incredible legislator, a strong voice on so many different issues, serves on the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Delegates, which he'll talk about and explain kind of what they do, and is also the chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus. And we're going to talk about that. And he's really become an incredibly powerful voice on a whole range of issues and has helped to bring the Legislative Black Caucus into much greater prominence. So Delegate, it's great to see you, and good morning.
Listen, it's a pleasure to be here and have this conversation with you, my friend, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I think there's so much to be discussed today, looking at where we are in this country and where we are here in the state of Maryland. I think we need to have broader conversations centered around those things, and I look forward to us diving into it.
Sounds good. Well, look, let's get right into it. I want to ask kind of a non-legislative issue first, because a lot of people who may not know, have not met you before, and don't kind of research legislators and so forth. Tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of what you do in the off session, how you got into politics. Kind of a general. Who is Delegate Darryl Barnes?
I always say, I'm a guy from humble beginnings. I was born in Washington, D.C. Just like most families, my father thought we were the Jeffersons and we were moving on up, and we moved to Prince George's County in the suburbs. I went to High Point High School, and I always say my claim to fame is in 1982, we beat Northwestern for the state championship in basketball. So I was real proud and excited about that. Right out of high school, I went to Georgetown University, realizing I couldn't put my way through college. I joined the military, where I served 4 years in the United States Navy. And then when I got out the Navy, I went to the United States Army. But while I was in the United States Navy, stationed in California, I went to Long Beach State to get my degree in computer information systems. So all of that, led me to this point here. I came back home to Maryland, and I started a couple of companies. One is a prominent IT company that I started called Precise Technologies Group. And then I started a real estate development company. And now I'm one of the first minority-owned, Black-owned to manufacture and produce bottled water here in the state of Maryland. I'm real excited about that. And you and I had some conversation. I started the Bi-County Business Roundtable, which is a microcosm of a Chamber of Commerce, where we do a lot of advocacy, networking, procurement opportunities, trainings for small businesses. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. I am an entrepreneur, but I believe heavily in social issues that impact primarily the African-American community. and how do we now start having broader conversations of centered around equity and inclusion. I was real excited about this past session where the Speaker of the House came out with her Black agenda, which really focused in on those things that I just spoke about. How do we look at things more comprehensively as it affects our communities, especially centered around economics, transportation, education, things that we often do not have conversations around, and then procurement opportunities for our small businesses. You know, we know that small business is the backbone of the economy, but we have to do a better job here in the state of Maryland in promoting and giving greater access to our small businesses to give them an opportunity to grow and flourish. You know, we talk about generational wealth, but we need to really start implementing those things so we can see those things through.
All right. Well, we have a lot to cover. It's a great introduction, and you are clearly have a busy both session and off session. Let's dig into kind of one of the most interesting and exciting things that's going on right now. You were front and center on the issue of sports betting in Maryland, making sure that the Legislative Black Caucus had an incredibly strong voice in that debate. You know, where are we right now with sports betting in Maryland? How do we relate? I know you've been doing some traveling around the country talking about Maryland as a model for this. I'm just going to let you go with this. So I think a lot of people don't know the details of this. I think most people know that it's coming. Where are we in Maryland, and what can we expect to see in the coming months?
You know, I like to say, you know, people say, well, Maryland got into the game late with sports betting. I would say Maryland got in right on time, simply because we had an opportunity to see what other states were doing correctly and incorrectly. And Maryland had an opportunity to fine tune our legislation to really focus in on what I just spoke about, which was the equity and inclusion piece. Taking lessons learned from the medical cannabis when we first rolled out with medical cannabis, where we issued 15 licenses to all white men. There was no minority participation in that industry at all for minorities or African Americans. But since then, we came out with House Bill 2 years ago, and now we have more African Americans in the medical cannabis industry than any other state in the union. So that was really led by effort by the Black Caucus. I'm real proud of that. And so far, we have now put together in House Bill 940, which was the sports betting bill, a bill that really focused in on minority participation and ensuring that yet another multi-million-dollar industry coming before the state of Maryland now has some real teeth behind it that says that minorities have an opportunity to participate in this industry. And one of the things that I really led on was that sole fact is, how do we take the lessons learned from medical cannabis and apply them into what we're doing in sports betting to ensure that minorities have an opportunity to participate. So when you look at the brick and mortar, there are 60 licenses for brick and mortar for sports betting, which now opens the door where minorities have an opportunity to apply and qualify for one of those licenses. There are 30 licenses for mobile, which once again, we know that that's where the real money is in the mobile licensing. So now minorities have an opportunity to participate in that. And because of the strong push of the Black Caucus, now the Washington football team, the casinos here in the state of Maryland have all come out and said that, listen, that once we receive our license, then we're going to give a equity stake to a minority to participate in this licenses with us, thus creating generational wealth. So I'm real proud of that. I have other states calling me saying, how in the world did Maryland lead that effort? And how did you have so much minority participation written into a bill? And how can we now implement that in our respective states? So they're taking our lessons now and applying it. Some states are rewriting their laws to now include more minority participation. And because of this, I've had the opportunity to travel to other states. I'll be in Atlantic City talking to the Gaming Commission in Atlantic City on sports betting and the importance of equity and inclusion for minorities. So I'm real proud of what we're doing here in the state of Maryland and how we're leading that effort.
Just as a quick side note, I'm not going to hold it against you that when you mentioned a football team, it was the Washington team and not the actual state team, the Baltimore Ravens. I'm not going to hold it against you, but nonetheless, I am curious though, like how is it that, as I was kind of looking at this issue from afar, and I know you were knee deep in the details of it, in addition to the numbers of licenses, how does a small business owner compete with the DraftKings of the world or the casinos where people are going to gamble? So if somebody wants a license, say at their bar or restaurant or at an independent establishment, is there anything in the bill that kind of helps boost them, or is it just the fact of having the license that would hopefully that would attract people? Like how does a small business person, whether minority or otherwise, compete with the big boys in this space?
Yeah, so I mean, the bill itself establishes a small minority-owned and women-owned business fund for support for application assistance, operation, targeted training and support and participation in the industry itself. The fund will receive 5% of revenues to go into that fund, which
Okay.
now dedicates to help small businesses.
Got
Right?
it.
No other bill in the nation has that type of incentive for small businesses to participate. Maryland led the way. So yeah, I'm excited about what we're doing.
That's great. That's great. And when, just as a quick follow-up before we move on to other issues, when are Maryland residents likely to be able to participate in this, both from the application process, but also like when I go to football games this year, can I anticipate there being, a place to lose my money over at Raven Stadium, or what is the time frame on this?
Well, you won't lose your money if you bet on the Washington football team, but
You and
I
I
would just
both
say,
know- come on, you and I both know that that's not accurate, but continue. I'm sorry.
but I would just say that the draft regulations just came out a week ago. There's a 30-day period for review of that draft regulations. The SWORC, which is the commission that would look over all applications, was just formed maybe 2.5 weeks ago. So there's that process. We're kind of fast tracking this thing. The hope or the goal was to try to get us up and running by football season, September. So, there's a process, but I always say that we want to be as methodical as we possibly can to make sure that we're doing things correctly and not rushing. But there is, somewhat of an internal sense of urgency in trying to get us up and running as soon as possible.
All right. I'm going to switch to another topic. You brought it up earlier, and another one which is hot in the state of Maryland. So in my 21-year legislative career, I think there was always a bill on cannabis, and I was there for the very earliest quote medical cannabis bill, where we created a medical defense all the way through the failures and now to where we are today, where we have an up and kind of a thriving and up and running medical cannabis industry. So now, of course, the debate is what's next, and the next is, at least what's been in the news, is legalization of recreational use of marijuana for adult use. And so I guess I'm gonna start this as an open-ended question, because I saw in the news that the speaker had put together a work group and had talked about a referendum, and the Senate was on a different track, saying that they wanted to move forward. The Senate president had mentioned moving forward with a bill this session.
Right.
So it seems like it's on different tracks, but that's often the case, many months away from session. I guess I'll start with an open-ended question, although I will have some follow-ups. Let's start with the second one. Where are we with recreational legalization of marijuana? What are your thoughts on it, and what do you foresee in the coming legislative session on this?
Let me just say, I think we're more on the same page than we're not. I want to be clear when folks say, there's some, differences. I think at the end of the day, we want to, once again, make sure that we're doing it right and correctly here in the state of Maryland. Some would say that Maryland is getting in the game late again with another big initiative, but I would say that we're getting in right on time because now we have an opportunity to have seen what other states have been able to do, good and bad. And I think the speaker is being very insightful and said, let me at least put together a work group. to have a more robust conversation centered around the legalization of marijuana here in the state of Maryland. And let's look at all aspects of this legalization, from the business community, so from the social ill wills of it, how do we proceed, what's the rollout, what's the tax benefits, the whole 9 yards. And I think until you have that type of robust conversation and thought going into it, it's kind of hard to just say, let's roll out a bill without putting some input into it and having input from other subject matter experts around the country for that matter. So I think that's what we'll be doing this interim. I have the opportunity to be a part of that work group that she has put together. So I'm excited about, seeing how that it was being rolled out. But I've always said that before we move forward in legalization of marijuana, that we must get medical cannabis done correctly first. And I am just one of the mindset that there should not be a cap on licenses for growers and processors for medical cannabis here in the state of Maryland, that there should not be a cap, that it should be open to the free market, meaning that if one qualifies and one has all the necessary things to obtain a license for grower and processor here in the state of Maryland, then one should be able to obtain one. We know that other states are thriving without a cap. I believe that Maryland should follow suit and removing the cap. We know that when we first rolled out with medical cannabis, and Bobby, you were there, you know it better than I do probably, how things were rolled out, the things that went good and indifference, especially in the application process, how those things happen. We know that people spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to obtain a license and lost by a fraction of a point, of actually obtaining a license. And I don't think that's right. I think, how can I be number 19 and you're awarding 20 licenses and I lost by 1/10 of a point? And I just believe that it should be open. I think from a monetary standpoint, companies still can thrive here in the state of Maryland, because as the medical cannabis program has rolled out, we have seen the increase of patients. We've seen the increase in dollars or revenue that these companies have received. And once again, not to be redundant, but opening it up, I think now makes it more fair, it makes it more transparent, and those that can qualify can qualify. So then you move into the legalization of marijuana itself.
So let's talk about that. How does that? So if you have, obviously there's I always used to tell people there's the medical, there's legalization, and then there's the criminal aspect. So putting the criminal aspect aside, which is a whole different issue, and seems like there's a lot of consensus around how to move there. For legalization, I guess the question is, what do you see, and kind of what are your priorities for the details for a bill if we move forward with adult use in the state? And then kind of a foreshadowing of where we are and what you think will actually happen this legislative session.
Well, I think I was put on the committee for one reason. One is to ensure that there is some form of equity and inclusion within this bill. And then two, to really look at the social ill wills of legalization, meaning that, I will be leaning on the State Bar Association to help me when you start talking about how do we rewrite the wrong of the expungement of those that have been criminalized for small amounts of marijuana here in the state of Maryland. How do we now expunge those records? How do we now move forward in a program that makes sense? We know that marijuana is still a Schedule I drug. We know that there are still certain banking institutions that will not allow you to deposit those funds into their banks. So I think, you have to look at all of these things comprehensively before we move forward. And once again, that's why I'm encouraged by the fact that the speaker wants to do a work group, because we can't just roll out a bill without having conversations with the Maryland Banking Association. We can't roll out a bill without talking to our federal counterparts on the criminalization of marijuana and how those two things work together. So I think there are so many moving parts when you talk about legalization that there has to be a more robust conversation. There has to be other subject matter experts that are advising us and making sure that we're moving in the right direction. And for me personally, like I said, I'll be relying on you all to help me from the social impact statement standpoint to make sure that we're moving in the right direction for our communities.
So I'm going to ask one more follow-up on it, and then I'm not going to try to pin you too much on it. But again, we've got some five some odd months before session. Do you see at come April of 2022, is this something that simply is going to be put on the ballot for the voters to make a decision on, and then do an implementation bill, after the work group? Or do you think that this is enough time before session that there could actually be a specific implementation bill, regardless of whether or not it gets put on the ballot?
Listen, there was a survey conducted that 77% of Marylanders want legalization here in the state of Maryland. It is my hope that senior leadership within the General Assembly come together and have conversations on how to best move forward after we get this work group and obtain some more information. I believe that it's important that the Senate President and the Speaker of the House have conversations. I believe that Senator Smith and Delegate Kiplinger have conversations. I believe that we must work together as a unified body to make sure that we're making the right decision. Putting it on a referendum will then, set us back another year, or actually 2 years. So, we have to look at all of those things to make sure that, is that the right decision, or should we move forward with 77% of Marylanders saying that we want it? So I think, at the end of the day, I feel confident that the best outcome will be had by the time session starts.
Okay. I'm going to switch again. And this last legislative session, I want to talk things about what we've done in the past, also, kind of your vision for what's coming up in the next year, and beyond. Talk a little bit about the campaigns too. I won't pin you down too much, but this last year, obviously the big issue before one of the big issues before the Maryland General Assembly was police reform, police accountability in the wake of, obviously the George Floyd, and you and I were just at a celebrity, although I don't know how we got into that role, but celebrity basketball game for Breonna Taylor's family. So could you talk through kind of what you thought of what Maryland did this year, kind of like now you've had a chance to kind of reflect on what happened, the differences, some things that maybe you thought went too far, didn't go too far enough, and where, I'm just going to let you talk about this incredibly important issue.
The police accountability, police reform is a huge undertaking. I would not want to be a chairman of a committee that has to deal with that because right, you understand. But I just think, looking at over the last year and a half and the social ill wills that plagued our country, looking at what happened to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the names go on and on and on. Hell, just 2 weeks ago, or I say less than a month ago, which just happened in Ocean City, Maryland, where you had 2 young Black boys that were pepper sprayed by the police, and one was hogtied by the police. Still goes to show that there are major problems in our country, especially in light of the day where you have cell phones and everybody has a camera, that some people feel emboldened still to do whatever they want. So I think when you look at the use of force that we passed, you look at a lot of the different measures that we passed, some would say that we still have a long way to go. In 1970, here in the state of Maryland, we passed the Maryland Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. In 2021, we repealed them. Is that good or bad? Some would say we still have some work to do because of the transparency that our police officers need to give and the things that needs to happen. But when you look at the no-knock warrant, the use of force, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, we have made some tremendous strides and progress here in the state of Maryland. You, for example, chaired that Judiciary Committee in the Senate. So you understand the magnitude of what's going on. You understand the flight of the minority communities. You understand, especially Black boys and Black girls, how we are targeted by police officers. These things are real. So I think, having more robust conversations and sometimes unapologetic conversations centered around this issue is critically important, or not only moving a community forward, but moving the state of Maryland forward. I think at the end of the day, no one dislikes the police, no one, because I think we all need the police. But I do believe that we have to be smart and comprehensive and methodical in our ideology and what we're doing and how we're moving forward that's best for all Marylanders, not just one particular group. And sometimes those decisions are hard. But I must say that, and I know that Senator Smith is on this call, he did a yeoman's job in trying to hold down the fort and working together with the folks that were in one ear and the other folks that were in another ear, and really trying to make the right decisions. I know on the House side, we had folks that were, trying to do the right thing. So it's never a situation where everybody's going to walk away and say that it's 2 thumbs up. Someone's always going to walk away saying that we didn't get enough, or there's more to happen. And unfortunately, I've always said in this business, there's winners and losers. So I think, from that experience, we have an opportunity to come back in 2022, look at all of the things that we did correctly. Let's fine tune some things, because I do believe there are some more things that we can look at, and some things we need to aggressively go after to make change. And I think we will do that. I think this process has opened up everybody's mind to now be more in tune to what's going on around the country and what's going on here in the state of Maryland, and really focus in on how do we change some of the laws here in Maryland.
Are there anything in particular that either you or the Black Caucus are planning on pushing, or is it just kind of take a breath and see where everything fell from last year's very comprehensive reform and kind of move from there? Or is there any are there specific items? I mean, I saw, throughout this process, looking again from the cheap seats, that you got on Twitter, all these advocacy groups on both sides just kind of throwing grenades at all the legislators for either the things they thought went too far, didn't go far enough, and
Sure.
most of the time were wrong about what they were saying factually. But nonetheless, is there anything specific that you want to see pushed, or is it kind of a wait and see right now on this one?
Well, for me, and I don't want to say, what those things are. What I will be doing is reaching out to our leaders, like Delegate Atterbury, Senator Smith, Delegate Deborah Davis, and some others that are really focusing in on our judiciary system, Senator Sidnor, and others, to really start figuring out how can we come together as a Black caucus and look at these things more comprehensively. What are the issues on the table, and how can we as a caucus, as a unit, as an organization, be more on the same page than not? And I think that's where it starts for me, is that we must open up the lines of communication, that we are on the same page and we are in lockstep. And I think if we can do that, then I think making the push for what we want becomes that much more easier.
All right. So the next topic is kind of in the same realm, which is criminal justice reform. And these are all very large topics I'm throwing at you, but I know that the Black Caucus takes a role in a lot of various issues, particularly in these areas. So a couple of years ago, I think you were here for the Justice Reinvestment Act, where at the time it was the biggest criminal justice reform in the country. And there have been things done ever since. Just a few days ago, Baltimore City talked about having, what they call safe injection sites, or, areas where people can essentially legally go and take drugs and try to get treatment. State's Attorney Mosby. I'm throwing a lot at you right now because I'm going to just leave this open ended and let you go. State's Attorney Mosby has she was at the game the other day, unfortunately, watching us play. Not that it was unfortunate to see her, but it was unfortunate she was actually watching what we did. But and she has what she's doing in Baltimore City, and yet the crime rate, here in Baltimore City, our area and around the country is kind of going in the wrong direction. And so you throw all that into the mix and you say to yourself, well, how do we get crime under control and get our continue to look at our criminal justice system to get it right, whatever that means. Thoughts on that from yourself as a delegate from Prince George's County, as the chairman of the Black Caucus? Where do you think we need to be heading as a state?
I think it's extremely hard to make changes sometimes. Listen, I think every elected official all has the right intentions. And I think we all want to do what's right. We all want to do something positive. And we all want to leave a legacy that we have effectively made change. But when you have sometimes forces running up against you, it's hard to make those changes. And I think, we all have different ideas and ideology on how we want to do things, which makes it somewhat more complex. But I do believe that, what Baltimore is doing in Prince George's County and other places around the state. Listen, you look at Illinois, for example, which leads the country almost in murders. Do you think the governor and the mayor and those folks, want to have that title? Everybody's doing all that they possibly can to try to curb what's going on. I think sometimes it's smack in your face and what we're doing. As I travel around the states, folks are telling me, Delegate Barnes, I don't want to be the stick-up kid. I need a job. I need opportunities, right? I think that's a lot of it is, how do we change the economics of the state of Maryland, which now gives more opportunities for inner city Black boys and Black girls than never before. I think, to me, that's why this upcoming election is so important, that I want to see a governor who is visionary on how do we change the dynamics, right? We can create all kind of centers for addicts and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, I think it all boils down to money, economics. And until we start having more robust conversations around that, I think we're going to continue to have what we're having, right? I think, the State Bar Association would say, I don't want to continue to prosecute or defend a lot of these cases. And a lot of these cases can be subsided if the economics of the state were a little bit different. As I travel to Western Maryland is saying, Delegate Barnes, we need help over here, right? Small businesses are calling me saying, I'm not getting contract opportunities because they keep awarding the contracts to the same individuals. The Black Caucus just had to write a letter a couple of weeks ago where they were going to award $187 million to a company in Indiana from the Board of Public Works, right? So when you start looking at all of these things comprehensively, you say, who's making the decisions for the economics and the well-being of Marylanders? And once again, how do we create generational wealth? Because once you start creating generational wealth, now you have more communities working, you have more communities striving, and now the crime rate starts to go down, education system goes up, and more businesses want to move into Maryland. So we have to really focus in on that aspect.
So I apologize for asking you questions in the Judiciary Committee, and you have brought it back to the Ways and Means Committee. So let's keep on this topic then. How do you do what you're just talking about? Is it through the MBE program? Are there specific targeted legislation? Are there specific targeted industries that you think could help create that generational wealth? How do we move? You are now outside of my world of expertise, being on Ways and Means and what you all do there. So how is it that you can affect those types of things so that Senator Smith doesn't have to hear every year about the escalating crime rate? What are the types of things that we can do?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, and I applaud our majority leader, Eric Lukey, Delegate Lukey, because he oversees revenues for the state of Maryland. And I am the subcommittee chairman for local revenues, which oversees more tax revenues for businesses and property taxes and those sorts of things. But I think, we have to have more robust conversations on how do we lure bigger companies here? What tax incentives can we create to make them want to come to the state of Maryland? And then more importantly, how are we looking at that more comprehensively in certain pockets of the state of Maryland that may not have such a robust economic engine that still needs that to be able to thrive? So, once again, we need that visionary individual that's looking at the state of Maryland more comprehensively, that says that we need to focus in this particular area, or this particular district, or this particular jurisdiction, because that would then help so many people. I think, once you start doing that and really start having a more robust conversation, how do we now look at our K through 12 here in the state of Maryland and really start looking at what's going to attract businesses that want to come here because we have a thriving education system? That's the conversations we want to have. I think we passed landmark legislation and finally settling a 15-year-old HBCU lawsuit of $577 million, which now gives our 4 HBCUs here in the state of Maryland the much needed additional revenue that they need to be more on the cutting edge and be more competitive. Those things help the state of Maryland. So I think, you start looking at all of those things, then you start saying, this is how we're going to combat crime. This is how we're going to now start doing, bringing the crime rate down. This is how we're going to now start bringing in more businesses and communities start thriving. People start going out, circulating their dollars within their community because now it's more appealing. There's not addicts on the side of the corner or homelessness that we have. Once we start focusing in on that, I think the dynamics will change.
So I saw like some of your bills, some interesting ones, and I apologize for looking away, but I wrote these down. Again, these are Ways and Means type bills, but the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, there was some funding there, and MBE, public-private partnerships. Is this the type of kind of targeted tax credits and incentives for businesses that you're talking about? And could you talk about kind of what, that as a larger issue?
One of the things, I had a great conversation with Roland Martin, and Roland Martin said, Delegate Barnes, you can fight all day long on criminal justice reform and education and all these things, but until you really start focusing in on economics, nothing is going to change. So my mindset and posture has totally shifted, where I am now focusing in on more on economics, and I think the bills that I introduced reflect that. Right, we just gave TechCo $10 million to help them with emerging businesses here in the state of Maryland, more entrepreneurship, and giving them the leverage to be able to fund those businesses to be able to create and develop. Right, we don't have a thriving production or manufacturing arm in the state of Maryland like we once used to. That's a problem, right? So I think, if you start looking at other states and what they're doing well, Maryland now has to retool our thinking and really start looking at things a little bit more differently and more comprehensively. If you look at our MBE program, some would say it needs some help, right? But we haven't focused in on minority participation and increasing the minority participation goal in decades. That's an issue for me. If you look at the minority participation, what it stands for, and Ways and Means, when we were talking about sports betting, and people were testifying, they said, well, my wife is white, so she's a minority, so I qualify. But yes, she's just a figurehead for you, the white man, and getting that license. So I think we have to look at things more comprehensively that really makes sense. We want to make it fair and more transparent for everybody, but we really have to start diving in and having more robust conversations about all of these issues, right? One of the bills that Delegate Jazz Lewis and I introduced was creating a new department similar to GSA at the federal level, mainly focusing in on our small businesses and businesses in general, right? For the life of me, I never understood why MDOT, the Maryland Department of Transportation, is over certifications, right? And so many other departments do their own procurement stuff. I think all of those things need to be in one central place where businesses and people alike know where they should go in order to get their certifications, where procurement opportunities are, and not a hodgepodge all over the state. So I think we need to start looking at things a little bit more robust, once again, at our approach and how we do business here in the state of Maryland.
Interesting. Huge issues, and you tackled those issues on the Ways and Means Committee, correct?
Correct.
What else, for those, again, just to be a little bit more general, for those who aren't following, with all the acronyms and so forth, what exactly is the jurisdiction of the Ways and Means Committee? Like, what is it that you guys do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so Ways and Means oversees election laws, gaming and racing. So all your casinos, horse racing, lottery, we oversee that kind of stuff. Revenues for the state of Maryland, local revenues, education, early childhood, all of those things fall under the preview of Ways and Means. So if you look at those things, I mean, those are big issues that take on a lot of responsibility in the state of Maryland. And I think if we have an opportunity to have more robust conversations and feedback from the State Bar Association on how do we look at those things, because I'm sure these attorneys kind of tackle a little bit of everything from employment law to business and criminal justice, you name it, is how do we have more conversations like this? And this kinds of things, I would love to set up quarterly, where I can get more feedback from the Bar Association on a quarterly basis. So we all meet 4 times a year just for feedback to say, hey, maybe you all should look at this, or maybe you all should look at that. Or, you know what, Delegate Barnes, you got that one right? Everybody likes a little accolades now and then. So tell me what I'm doing right instead of what I'm doing wrong all the time. But I think if we can have those conversations, now everybody feels part of the team, right? Now everybody has some input. And I think that's how we move the state forward, and versus looking at something or reading something in the paper, then everybody's making a judgment. I want to give everyone access, a seat at the table. Let's have those conversations. Let's figure out what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. Because I'm sure a lot of these attorneys are, they've done research. They know the history of whatever they're fighting for. So provide that input to me. And I think we can then make a significant change here in the state of Maryland.
It's a great message. I'm going to put a pin on something you said, because I do want to get back to it before we leave here today, which is elections, because I want to get back to that in a second. Mm-hmm. But just as an aside, the MSBA is doing a lot of new things, including having legal interns that we're going to be putting, offering to various delegates. So I think that, and senators. So I think maybe that's a great opportunity to get some young people, some young lawyers in, and young law students into some of these offices to assist and keep.
I love that idea.
I wanted to ask you, every year, the legislators will put in bills that mean something. Some pass, a lot of them get killed. You and I had a conversation over the weekend about one in particular. And before we leave kind of the substantive arguments, and I do want to talk a little bit about the elections that are coming up and your thoughts on that, I did want to ask you, I read your bill that you had mentioned to me, which seemed like it was just a task force or a work group dealing with minority participation in the alcoholic beverage industry. And it caught my attention just because in Baltimore County, we had a lot of fights about the alcoholic beverage industry, and about kind of, there was a lot of issues about who should have, again, almost like Canada was like talking in the same, who should have licenses, how those things get traded, the value of them, and on. And one of the issues we had not talked about, which is minority participation in that. What brought you to that issue, and what are your thoughts on that? The bill did not pass, and kind of what are your thoughts about it, and are you planning on introducing that again, and where is that headed?
Yeah, well, so when you look at the alcohol industry in the state of Maryland, once again, there are very few Black or minorities participating in yet this industry. And I introduced a bill which basically conducts a diversity study on, let's look at the state of Maryland as a whole, and figure out, are minorities participating? And if so, what areas and how? And if they're not, what can we do to introduce them into yet another budding business here in the state of Maryland? And unfortunately, the bill passed. It passed out of the House, but failed in the Senate. And, didn't cost the state anything. So I didn't understand why the bill passed, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I think, when you start looking at these things and how do we move Maryland forward, I think we have to start looking at things comprehensively. And I know I keep sounding redundant, but it's the facts that, we have to start figuring out, how do we look at certain industries that have little or zero representation of people of color. But yet it's an industry that is making millions upon millions and sometimes billions of dollars without any representation of minorities. I don't think that's right. So how do we now change those dynamics and let minorities participate in this industry? I think the old days of the fat cat continuously just getting rich and making money hand over fist are coming to an end, right? We have to start letting other young people, other businesses get into these industries with new ideas and forward ways of thinking and being creative, and once again, create generational wealth for all Marylanders. And I think once you start looking at that, now the state as a whole begins to thrive, right? Crime goes down. Communities are starting to uplift. People are speaking to the neighbors saying, "Hi, Bobby," and Bobby saying, "Hi, Darryl." Now we're making things more back in the day kind of feel, where now we feel comfortable with letting our kids run around in the neighborhood and not wondering, what's going on. That's what I'm fighting for and trying to bring back. Those types of opportunities and feel-good stories that we once had here in the state of Maryland. And yes, there are certain pockets that have that, but I think overall we need to do a better job.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep my eye on that. It did catch my fancy. One of the last bills I introduced and tried to get through was to allow Baltimore County liquor stores to open on Sundays. I think they weren't permitted to sell, and someone wanted to open it. I never quite understood that, but you run up against a buzzsaw sometimes, particularly in that industry. So I thought that it was a pretty no-brainer of a bill, but I'll be interested in how you progress with this one, because it's an interesting issue, and there's a lot of range of issues in that alcohol industry. So it should be really interesting. All right, I put a pin in it. Now I'm not going to let you off the hook on it. We have elections coming up. Lots of individuals running for governor. Governor Hogan has had, this is going to be his 8th and final session. And so what are your thoughts about the coming gubernatorial election? What are you looking for in a candidate? And how do you see this moving, as we've got less than a year now to the at least the primary, and kind of where do you see things as we sit here today at the end of July?
I'm voting for anyone that Monica Best James is voting for. So that's what I'm doing. No, but I just say that I just had a fundraiser a couple of weeks ago where I had all the Democratic GOP candidates come before my fundraiser and speak on a topic that is important to me, which is the Black agenda. That I wanted to hear from them. What are they going to do for the African-American communities? And I wanted them to hold them accountable, that they put that Black agenda on their website. So that everybody in the state of Maryland will be able to see, this is what I am doing. So the governor pick I think is important, but for me, more importantly, is his cabinet picks, because I think, once again, from a economic standpoint and procurement standpoint, some of these agencies dole out millions of dollars of contracts every year with little representations of people of color on the receiving end. So those cabinet picks are critically important for me in the selection of the governor. Then lastly, it is his lieutenant governor's pick or her lieutenant governor's pick. And I'm looking for someone that is going to help govern the state of Maryland, and not just as a ceremonial position, but someone that is really fighting for issues that are important to our community. So I think if you start looking at all of those things comprehensively, I think now we can say that we're moving the state of Maryland in a way that we have never done before. So in October, the Black Caucus will be having a meet the GOP candidates reception. And there will be an opportunity to meet not only the Democratic, but the Republican candidates all at the same time. And we will give them all an opportunity to speak on two particular topics: their Black agenda and the economics of the state of Maryland. And what's your plan? So I think, you know, if they can now articulate that in front of the hundreds of people that will be in the room, and we're all able to hold them accountable for what their plans are, then I think we can have a more informed decision on who we want to best represent us here in the state of Maryland. But until we start holding them accountable for their ideology and their rollout, then I think it's hard to say who we're going to support.
And in a more generalized sense, as we sit here at the end of July, any handicapping that you could do on the race at this point in time, or you want to keep that to yourself?
Yeah, I'm keeping that one to myself.
Very wise. All right. Well, Darryl Barnes, are there any issues that I haven't covered? We've been here for an hour now, and I could go on with you for many hours. I love listening to you talk and hear your views on these issues. We've covered a few. Are there any issues that I haven't asked you about that you want to particularly highlight for the members of the State Bar Association?
No, listen, I am really passionate about the economics of the state of Maryland and how we're moving Maryland forward. I think at the end of the day, I am always looking to build collaborative relationships with like-minded individuals, right? Where we share the same ideology. The methodology may be a little bit different, but the approach is the same. It's how do we make Maryland what we all want it to be? And I think, you know, what I'm offering is to say, I want to have a more robust conversation with the State Bar Association, at least on a quarterly basis, where we all can sit down and share ideas and share different philosophies on how do we make Maryland better. And I will prepare a topic of, here are my focus points in the upcoming session. So if you're interested in these things, these are the folks I need at the table. And I think if we can start having those types of conversations around the state of Maryland and looking at things more robustly, then I think we're making progress. When you look at criminal justice reform, police accountability, I think there needs to be more conversations with those individuals that will help shape the pieces of legislation that's needed to move the state of Maryland forward. When you start looking at education and what's going on in the state of Maryland, and certain pockets of our school system is thriving and some are not, I think we need to have conversations around why aren't these parts not thriving like other parts of the state. And we need to have frank conversations about the changes that's needed. And until we start doing that, we're not going to make progress. You know, you start looking at transportation and the infrastructure around the state of Maryland. Some parts of the state is infrastructure and transportation is thriving. But then there's other parts, I'm hitting a pothole every 5 miles I go down the road, right? Why is that the case? I think we need to start looking at where we're putting our money, our infrastructure dollars here in the state of Maryland. When you start looking at climate control, which I think is really big, not only here in the state of Maryland, but around the world. We really need to start having more robust conversations around climate control here in the state of Maryland. When you look at the Chesapeake Bay, you know, and what's going on there and our crab and oysters and all of and our wildlife, we need to start having more conversations on how do we change the climate around our Chesapeake Bay, which is our crown jewel here in the state of Maryland. These are the conversations that I think, you know, on a quarterly basis, you know, I like to bring in myself and other legislators to sit down with the State Bar Association to figure out how do we effectively make change. If we can do that, then I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say I'm all in.
I think that's great. And there are, there are leadership of the MSBA listening to this, and I think it is an excellent, excellent idea, and one that we will definitely be following up with you on. So, Delegate Barnes, I've taken an hour out of your life today. So I want to thank you so much. This has been a really interesting conversation on a range of big ticket issues. And I just want to thank you for your time and for your passion and for your commitment to the state of Maryland. And with that, I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining with us. And Shally, I'm going to turn it back to you.
That's it.
Thanks so much. Have a good
I was
morning,
just getting
everyone.
started.
We'll have
You're
you
not
back
taking
very
questions from
soon.
the audience?
Listen,
We had a few
Delegate
comments.
Barnes, I was going to start talking about your jump shot, but I figured we would keep that one out today.
Because if you talk about my jump shot, I'm gonna talk about yours too.
No, not from this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that. Sorry, Shally, sorry about that.
No, that's great. Good to see everyone this morning, and we'll catch you again soon for the rest of this series. And Delegate Barnes, we hope to connect with you again very soon.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.